Hello, everyone. So, today we are going to talk about skills. We're going to talk about what are skills, what is meant by progressive disclosure, how do you define skills, what are the components within a skill. We'll go through the folder structure, we'll talk about how progressive disclosure works, and then we'll get into the internal working of a skill, how it is different from other tools, how does the message formation works, and how does skill execution modify the conversation context and the execution context and a lot of things. So let's get started. This video is based on a deep dive on skills which I found online. So I have added the link to that GitHub article in the description. I'm also going to refer to that article in this video because it has great visuals and it is described how skills works very clearly. All right. So let's get started. What are skills? If you ever find yourself writing repeatable instructions or giving repeatable instructions to your agents, convert that into a skill because skill is a set of instructions in an MD file. It is just a folder which has a bunch of instructions, bunch of reference files, script file, assets, and all of that. So let me quickly share my screen and we will talk through some of the examples which we have. We'll talk through the examples online and see how people are building skills in the industry, what kind of structure they follow, and we'll understand skills through that. So this is a GitHub repo which I found on online on marketing skills. It has a lot of skills on marketing. And I have picked up the social content skill over here. So if you see the skill.md file here. So skills are basically instructions, folders containing instructions, right? And every skill will have a skill.md file. The skill.md file has a name, description, and other metadatas. The name and the description are mandatory for you to define whenever you are creating a skill. Now, name is self-explanatory. Description is where you describe when to use this skill. So, if you look at the description of the skill over here, it says when the user wants help creating, scheduling, or optimizing social media content for LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, then use this skill. Also, it has mentioned like when the user mentions LinkedIn post, Twitter thread, social media, when should I post, repurpose this content, all of that, then use this skill. So use this for any social media content creation, repurposing, or scheduling task. Now, if you go into the instructions of it, it has very clear instructions. So the first thing which it says is before creating content, gather the context. And for gathering the context, you need to have like these 4 points, and these are the questions which you need to ask. Then it goes into the platform references. So LinkedIn is best for B2B, thought leadership, frequency, key format, and all of that. And here, if you see, it says for detailed platform strategies, see references platform MD. So this is what is progressive disclosure. The first step for the agent is to figure out what skill to use. Once the agent figures out what skill to use, then the skill.md gets expanded and gets sent um into the conversation. So gets sent into uh, the context of the agent. Then agent reads through this, and if agent needs that, it needs more information. So it needs platform specific information as well. Then it will do another tool call. It will do a read file tool call, read this file, get the context from this file, and then proceed with user's query. So this is how progressive disclosure works. Now in skills, you see you always need to have a skill.md file, which is like your base file where you define the basic set of instructions and guidelines. Then in that skill.md file, you can have references to other files like we saw here for the platforms.md. So that's there in your references folder. It has references to other files as well. Now, apart from references, you can also have scripts. You can also have assets, like you can have fonts, HTML, CSS, JSON files, and all of that. A difference between references and assets is that references will be loaded into the context of the agent, but assets are files or paths which will not be loaded into the context but will be used in the execution of users' queries. So, for example, an asset can be a template, and in the skills.md, there will be instructions which would say that the template has these variables which needs to be populated for for this report generation. So let's say you're generating a report, you have an HTML template in your assets folder, and you want to generate that HTML with certain parameters. So all of that description can be in your skill.md file with a reference to that template in the assets. So that's your assets folder. Then you can also have scripts, and you can have any other folders as you wish, but these are like the industry standards which people are following. So if you see the Canva design skill, in the Canva design skill, you have Canva fonts over here. And if you look at the instructions, you will find, if I just quickly search for fonts, come on. Yeah. So search, use different fonts if writing text, search for Canva fonts directory, regardless of approach, sophistication is non-negotiable. Right? So you can give such instructions. You can use assets for formatting and a lot of other things. So this is a basic overview of what are skills and how like you define skills. Now let's get into the technical details of it. This is the article which I was talking about. I have added the link to this article in the description. Have a look at it. So we'll go through a simple flow of how skill is invoked in an agent execution. So whenever a user input comes in, Claude receives message along with the tools, and the first step for Claude is to figure out which tool is the right fit to use to respond to user's query. So it will figure out if it needs skills to respond to the user's query, then it will check whether the skill tool exists. If the skill tool exists, then the Claude reads the skill tool description. Because when the skills were implemented, the skills, all the available skills were part of your skills tool. So the skill tools will have the name and the description of the available skills. Then the next step for it is to figure out whether the user request matches the skill. If yes, then Claude invokes the skill tool with the skill name. It validates whether the skill exists, it checks for permissions, and then it loads the skill prompt. Now, the skill prompt is added as a user message in the conversation messages. So, I'll talk about this in a bit, but just keep that in mind that the when we say that the prompt is expanded, the prompt is basically added as a user message in your messages array. Okay. Uh, then we'll move on to the folder structure. We spoke about the folder structure, but I'll just quickly go through it once. So every skill will have a skill.md file. This is mandatory. Then all of the other folders are optional. You can have a license.txt file, you can have scripts folder, references, assets, and any other folder as you wish. Then moving on to writing skill.md file. Now your skill.md file is broken into two parts. The first is the configuration, second is the prompt for Claude. In the configuration, you define name, description, allowed tools, version, and there are certain other metadata attributes which you can define. We have spoken about name and description. Allowed tools basically tells the agent that these are the tools which the skill can use. So if whatever tools are mentioned in the allowed tools, basically those tools are then made available for that particular execution of that skill. Similar to allowed tools, you can also define model. So model is like for that particular execution, or when the skill execution is happening, you want a different model to be used. An example of this would be when you're doing a code review, you can use a higher end model. Like for complex task, you can specify that I want to use a reasoning model or a higher end model. Or another good example for this is when you are doing medical use cases, when you're dealing with medical use cases, or when your skills have medical information or data in it, you can specify uh, specialized fine-tuned models which you want to use with that particular skill. But I'm not sure whether Claude or any other providers have enabled bringing your own models. I know that you can specify the Claude models, like different versions of Claude models over here, but I'm not sure whether the open source models can be specified. But if that is enabled, that would be really good for use cases, like industry specific use cases. Uh, you can just specify the model as well over here. Then the other parameter to note over here is disable model invocation. Disable on model invocation when this is set to true. The skill does not get auto triggered by the agent. So the description of this skill will not be added to the skill tool. This skill will only be available as part of the slash command. So if you have worked with Claude Code, you know you can invoke a skill using a slash command. An example for this is Ralph loop. So Ralph loop as a skill can be invoked only by a user. Claude Code never auto triggers the Ralph loop skill. So for skills which you want users to invoke and you don't want the agent to invoke it automatically, you would set this flag as true, right? And then version is for managing the versions of the skill. So these are the metadatas in your configuration. Then coming to the prompt content itself, this is where your actual instructions lies. So this is where you define what the skill does, like the instructions for the skills. You give examples. You can define the output format, uh, error handling. You can mention references to scripts, references, and all of that. Then some of the best practices to write skills. So this is really important. The first one is keep your instructions under 5,000 words or 800 lines. So if you go to the Claude's official documentation, they say keep your skills under 500 lines. So that provides, like, you need to do that to better manage the context. Then the second thing is use imperative language. So give direct instructions. Like if you are giving instructions for code review, like check for duplicate codes, check for unused imports, check for this, like direct, straightforward instructions. Never write instructions in second person, like you should analyze this first and then do this. Don't do that. Then if you are referring to external files, always use base path, like always use the base directory. Don't hard code absolute path. So always give references to that file. Use base path basically. Okay. Now let's get back to our skill tool execution and we'll go into the details of how the execution work. What happens in the skill tool execution? So the first step of skill tool execution is it loads the MD file. The skill.md file is loaded. It parses the for front matter. Front matter is where your configuration is defined. So where your name, description, allowed tools, model, all those details are defined. And then the next part is your actual instructions. So your instructions get added to your messages array as a new message with role as user, and your configurations gets added to the context modifier where you have the details like model to be used, allowed tools, and the thinking token and all of that, right? So if you see over here, The prompt content modifies the message context. The configuration modifies the execution context. Execution context is where for that particular execution, the model changes, the tools changes. So this is something to keep in mind. All right, so this table is actually helpful. So it says it gives you the difference between a normal tool execution and a skill tool execution. So a normal tool is basically a direct action executor. A skill tool is prompt injection plus context modifier. Then the role of messages. For a normal tool, there would be an assistant message which says using this tool with these arguments, and the response of that tool is comes as a user message. For the skill tool, similar thing happens, but there are two messages which are injected. So first is the assistant message will be added, which would say that use skill tool with this argument. Then there will be two messages which is added. One is user with the tool result, and another one is the skill prompt. So there is this concept of is meta flag. Uh, where you only show the user what skill is being invoked, but the entire prompt is not showed to the user because it will then mess up with the conversation history. So that is being implemented using a is meta flag. So if the meta attribute is true, then that is not showed to the user. That's used for internal, just to send to the API, and only the skill name is being showed to the user. Then complexity, normal tool complexity is simple. Complex for skill tool because the skill tool is not giving any answer, it is just giving instructions, and then the agent has to act on those instructions in the next few messages. Token overhead is a lot more than a simple tool. Uh, yeah. Conversation and execution context injection design. So this is where they speak about is meta, this is meta flag. So using role user with is meta true makes skill prompt appear as input to Claude, keeping it temporary and localized to the current interaction. So this is what makes handling of the context easier. So after the skill completes, the conversation returns to the normal conversation context and the execution context without residual behavior modifications. Right? So after the skill is completed, then it goes back to the normal conversation context. We spoke about the meta flag. So this is what is sent to the user. This is what is showed to the user. The like executing the skill name with the skill argument, and the actual. I think right now Claude shows us there have been few modifications in the code, in the current code of the Claude code where the skills name and description is not added to the skill tool, but it is added as a system reminder. I'm going to do a separate video on that. We'll just go through this first, understand how this was implemented, and then we'll talk about the next set of improvements which were made. So, in the next set of improvements, they do show the full skills PDF as well. Okay. Then, why two messages instead of one? We have spoken about that. Yeah. Let's just go through the flow once, and that would actually help make it easier for you to understand how skills work. So, turn one is your user request. So, user sends in a request where user says extract text from report.pdf. This message goes to the Claude API or the LLM. The LLM decides that it needs to use a skill tool. It sends this. So you see the user message is extract text. Then and there is an assistant message which says tool uses skill, and the command is PDF. PDF is the name of the skill. Then your skill tool execution starts, where the first step is to load the skill.md file from the file system. Then it parses the MD file, we spoke about the front matter and the actual content. It uses the metadata and the skill prompt to create two messages. Then it generates the context modifier function. Context modifier function is which is the function which modifies the execution context. So it will uh, modify the execution for that particular skill to change the model and the allowed tools if it is mentioned. So you see over here, uh, there are two user messages which gets added. One is the metadata, skill metadata, where is meta flag is false. So this is showed to the user. And then where the is meta flag is true, where your entire MD file is there, that is your another message. And then you have a tool result success also added. And then the context is also modified. Then that goes to the API. Now in the API call, your model is changed, your allowed tools is changed, your context is basically changed. Right. So here all the messages are sent. Uh, Process skill prompt as user instructions. All of this is sent to the API. The LLM responds with depending on the instructions which are sent to the LLM. The LLM will figure out whether it needs to do more tool calls, whether it has to call a script or it has to read another reference file. So depending on that, the next tool executions would happen. So here it is saying use bash tool for PDF to text, and then that bash tool execution happens. It will check the permission for the bash PDF to text, which is enabled, which was there in the allowed tools. So it checks for the permission, it is allowed, and then it executes that particular script, and then the output is sent again to the LLM. It gets the response. The response, this is a normal tool execution, so the response is added the as for a normal tool execution. So you see assistant tool use bash and then user tool result bash success. The updated messages are sent to the LLM. The LLM reads the message, and then if it wants to read another file, it will, send another a read file tool. So this back and forth goes on. Then after, like once the execution is completed, the context is reset. So you see over here, it has used the bash tool, it has used the read tool, and then finally the execution is completed. The user message query, like it was able to respond to the user's query. Final result is sent to the user, and then in the next turn, the context was reset. Like the whole skills doesn't remain in the system, it doesn't persist in the system prompt for all the executions. I think that is it. In the next video, I'm gonna do a code walkthrough of how you can build your own skill execution tool using Google ADK, and there we will go into the details, go into the implementation details of this. So, hope this helps, and see you in the next video.